freedom, man. That's what it's all about. You've got to groove on freedom, like the good book says.
Welcome. You are listening to What on Earth is Happening. This show will discuss the topics of human consciousness, mind control, natural law, the occult, and all issues that affect the freedom of the people of Earth. What on Earth is Happening will endeavor to shine light upon the darkness of our world and to offer empowering solutions to the problems we face as humanity approaches its critical moment of choice. And now, here is your host, Mark Passio.
Welcome one and all. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening right here on Republic Broadcasting. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. The network's website, republicbroadcasting.org. Today is Saturday, December 27th, 2014. The last show of the year for the year 2014. The year flew by. It's amazing that we're already at the end of the year heading into 2015. This show is, of course, live every Saturday evening from 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Central Time. And we have a great show lined up for you here tonight, a very unexpected topic. I was, of course, planning on continuing the topic that we've been covering for the past several weeks on order followers, their mindset, and the mindset of the people who support them. And we will be continuing that topic into 2015. I'll be going into some more controversial material as I talk about the reasons that women support order followers and the role that women could play in the reversal of the mindset of order followers should they decide to step into that role instead of the role that they've been serving that supports the slavery agenda by supporting these individuals. So that's coming up on future shows, but tonight I have a very, very unique topic. I had a personal UFO sighting earlier today, and people will come down on two sides of this, and you'll have the true believers, and then you'll have the debunkers, and they'll never meet in the middle, and constantly be butting heads and battling. But I just posted the footage online to my YouTube channel and website. You can see it by going to the link on the left-hand side in the latest news. And also there's a link underneath the player for tonight's show. Tonight what I'll be doing is recounting the sighting that I and a friend had here in Philadelphia earlier today. And pointing people to the footage. They can go and check it out and watch it, and then I'll be taking your calls for people to comment on whatever you think that this may have been. You're free to call in and make your suggestions. But UFOs has always been a interest of mine. I would consider it one of the endpoints of how I really started to change my consciousness, and opening up my mindset in general to the acceptance of the possibility of non-human intelligence helped me to come out of the very sickened and diseased worldview that I had formerly been in that drove me into the arms of the dark occult when I was younger. So that's coming up on What on Earth is Happening a little bit later. Now, I do have a couple of quick event announcements. As a matter of fact, let me give the call-in number right here at the top of the show. If you want to join us in the next hour, the toll-free number to join us, 800-313-9443. Once again, The call-in number to join us, 800-313-9443. Just a couple quick event announcements. Of course, the Free Your Mind 3 conference coming at us in April of 2015, April 10th, 11th, and 12th. That's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday 2015 of April 2015. At the Sheraton Bucks County Hotel at 400 North Oxford Valley Road in Langhorne, Pennsylvania. Langhorne, PA is just north of the city limits of Philadelphia, a hop, skip, and a jump from Philly. The speakers already scheduled for the Free Your Mind 3 conference are as follows: Bob Tuskin, Clint Richardson, Curtis Davis, the Illuminated One, Dennis McKenna, Derek Brose, the New Jersey Weed Man Ed Fortune, Frater X, Freeman, Fritz Springmeyer, Jay Parker, John Vibes, Josie the Outlaw Wales, Larkin Rose, Luke Rudkowski, Mark Devlin, myself, Mark Passio, and Stuart Swerdlow. That's the lineup so far. More speakers will be added soon. There will also be a panel discussion group with the speakers, and there will be open mic sessions at the end of the evening from after the featured speakers are finished. There'll be 5 to 10 minute segments for people to get up on the microphone from just from the audience and talk about whatever they would like to get out there. An all-weekend pass for the Free Your Mind conference, all 3 days, including the speaker meet and greet on Friday night, only $150. You can get that deal at freeyourmindconference.com, where the best way of supporting this event is to buy tickets in advance, because that helps cover the cost of the venue and the speaker travel arrangements and the speaker lodging arrangements. So the best way anybody can support this conference is to please get your tickets in advance. For listeners of What on Earth is Happening exclusively, if you enter coupon code 93 at checkout at freeyourmindconference.com, that's coupon code 93, just the number 93, 93. At checkout, you'll receive a $20 discount on the all-weekend pass ticket, and you'll be able to get the all-weekend pass for the Free Your Mind 3 conference for only $130. You can't beat that deal anywhere for a conference of this size and scope and magnitude. So please go to freeyourmindconference.com today and get your tickets. I'll be preparing a hard-hitting, harsh presentation for the Free Your Mind 3 conference. My presentation is entitled The Cult of Ultimate Evil, Order Followers, and the Destruction of the Sacred Feminine. That is going to be a presentation that people are not going to want to miss, because it's going to really get down to brass tacks when it comes to what order followers are all about. Now, another great event coming up here in early 2015, the Tesla Science Foundation is presenting the third annual Tesla Memorial Conference. The theme of this year's conference is called Let's Create the Tesla Curriculum. This is taking place Saturday, January 10th, 2015, from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. at the New Yorker Hotel. The New Yorker Hotel is at 481 8th Avenue in New York, New York. For more information on this great conference, please visit teslasciencefoundation.org. Great group of people. You definitely want to check out their work. I highly encourage people to get their tickets for the third annual Tesla Memorial Conference coming up in New York on January 10th. There are still What on Earth is Happening promotional t-shirts available as a gift in return for a voluntary donation to help support my work. You can click the email link that is listed in the article at the top of the news section on the What on Earth is Happening promotional t-shirts to find out how to get one. There's also a donation button on the left-hand side of the whatonearthishappening.com website. If you feel that you've received value from the information that I've shared on the website and on this radio show, please feel free to make a voluntary donation to help support my work so that I can continue it into the future. With that having been said, I just want to direct everybody's attention up to the radio show page of the WhatOnEarthIsHappening.com website. Underneath the player for tonight's show, you can see images for tonight's show listed there as numerical links. You can click them to bring them up as a presentation. We'll be right back, folks. Earth is Happening right here on Republic Broadcasting. I'm your host, Mark Passio, my website, WhatOnEarthIsHappening.com. Before the break, I was directing everybody's attention to the website, WhatOnEarthIsHappening.com, to the radio show page. Underneath the player for the live broadcast, there are images for tonight's show. The first three images were regarding the two conferences that I talked about, the Free Your Mind 3 conference and the Tesla Memorial event coming up in New York. And the last three images, 4, 5, and 6, are images I took today of the skies over Philadelphia. And they were absolutely littered with chemtrails, with chemtrail spray. I mean, the geoengineering effort is going along full steam, and it's just, if anybody thinks this is normal water condensation, vapor, or any kind of normal jet activity from commercial jet airlines, I mean, you have to have your head examined. I don't even know what else to say. If you don't understand, geoengineering is a huge agenda, and it's going on, and it's been actively going on for well over 20 years, more likely than not, probably a lot longer than that. I mean, I've tracked it since about 1997, going on 18 years, and, been talking about it constantly. But just look at these images. I mean, the skies were absolute covered patchwork of lines in the sky from this chemtrail spray. These pilots were out there all day long, from in the morning until the sun went down. And it's just a disgrace that they'll still fly missions doing things that they have no idea the repercussions of, and just follow orders. Again, it's all part of the order following dynamic. But I figured this would be a good transition into the topic tonight, which was my UFO sighting, the second major UFO sighting that I've had in my life. I recounted my first one on the air several months back. And this one was arguably more dramatic. There's people who, again, come down on the skeptical side of things, saying these were birds. There are people who are the true believers, saying, these are, our space brothers who are basically lending their help, support, and guidance, etc. I mean, I'm trying to keep an open mind and just talk about what I feel they very well could have been and what I feel that they certainly weren't. And so I'll recount the story as it happened today. This is something that was completely unexpected, of course. I was in my home talking to a friend on Skype, and I heard my phone ringing in the other room. So I hung up the call on Skype, and I went to pick up my phone. And it was my friend John, and he said, "Mark, you got to get outside of your house and look toward the eastern sky, and you'll see a fleet of objects in the sky." And I went outside and I couldn't find them. He was trying to talk me through where in the general vicinity of the sky they were located, and I went out to my corner on my phone and was trying to pinpoint their position based on his description. I was not able to locate the objects. So he was about 3 blocks away from my current location and said, "I'll just walk over to you and point it out." So I waited on the street corner for him to walk to my position. And when we met up, he pointed out the objects to me, and I was immediately able to see where they were, and I became very interested. And these were a huge amount of objects. I would probably say close to 100 of them. And they were scintillating and glowing in the sky. And they looked spherical. And they were staying in one place in the sky. They weren't moving. They seemed to be hovering in one spot, high up. I would estimate almost 50,000 feet if I had to make a conservative estimate. Well beyond the chemtrail spray. Probably above, any lower natural clouds, which I don't think there were any natural clouds in the sky. I think every cloud formation, so-called cloud formation that was in the sky over Philadelphia today was a chem cloud. Was chemtrail spray that had fanned out. So when I looked at these objects, they had a very unnatural appearance to them, and definitely looked like they were staying exactly in one position but shifting in their relative positions to each other. So they were making these different patterns and formations in the sky. And I immediately took out my cell phone and started taking video footage. And that's the footage that you see on the news section of the site. It's the second item in the news section. And you could click the link underneath latest news that says Mark witnesses UFO event, video footage December 27th, 2014. Or you can click, if you're listening live, underneath the player it says video footage of Mark's UFO sighting of December 27th, 2014, just underneath the images for tonight's show. Now, the footage is a little bit shaky, obviously, because I had no tripod to take it on. So I'm just holding the camera and trying to do my best to keep it still. We were both, very taken aback and excited by this, as you'll hear in the, in the footage. And again, these things did not look like they were any kind of natural phenomenon. They looked like they were somehow being intelligently controlled. At least that's what it looks like to me. Now, again, there are people who will say, well, these are birds. I keep hearing the some type of geese, snow geese, etc. And I have an open mind that it's possible that the phenomenon of geese flying at high altitude could look similar. But there is something that happened during the course of this event. And I'll keep relating the story and I'll get to that. That makes me think that this was definitely some type of intelligent activity. Whether it be human or non-human is debatable, but, we could speculate on that. But my point here is we started filming this and asking other people who were passing by on the street to just take a look up and, see what they made of it, to get some other opinions or impressions. And a few people stopped on the street and looked up, and some of them said, oh, I think that's just birds, and some of them said, no, that looks very interesting, and I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what that is. A couple of people came out of their homes because they saw us looking up in the sky and filming, and some people walking down the street stopped, and some people even in cars stopped and pulled over to take a look at it to see, what we were looking at. And this, incidentally, was on my corner. On the corner of, we witnessed this from the corner of where my house is at. Okay, so it was right above my neighborhood. And, initially someone said, oh, I just think that's birds. But then even as he sat and watched it more and realized that they weren't moving at all, they did not move across the sky. It's as if they were just in that area of the sky and stayed still in one particular area of the sky as the formation morphed. So we'll pick up the story right there on the other side of this break. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to What on Earth is Happening. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. Continuing with the relation of the story from earlier today when I had a major UFO sighting. we were, looking at these craft, and they did not move in relationship to the sky. They stayed in one area of the sky. And, people will make the claim, well, if it was birds, they're maybe struggling against wind up there, and, it looks like they're not moving, but they're, making very little progress against a strong headwind or something to that effect. It just, I don't know how to explain to people who weren't there. You just would have had to see it with your eyes. A camera is going to only do it so much justice. And again, it's not like I'm sitting there with a camera rig. I took my cell phone out of my pocket, so the footage is as good as it is. But when you saw these things through a pair of high-powered binoculars, they looked perfectly spherical. Now, people will also say, well, birds up at a high altitude can look, like an orb. Possibly too, but they maintained exact equidistant relationships to each other as well, all of them, especially when you looked at them through binoculars. And the thing that really, as more people came to observe them, most people were coming to the same conclusion that these did not look like birds, and it did not look like something that was a natural event happening. The thing that really threw me and really made me do a complete double take, I mean, I was already amazed at what we were witnessing, but as we watched this first original set of objects slowly move over toward one direction of the sky, they hovered for a long time, I'd say over 10 to 15 minutes in exactly one area of the sky, then started going to the eastern portion of the sky. And then it looked like they faded. It looked like they were rising higher and higher and higher and higher, not just getting farther away, but they were moving up in altitude. And then they faded to a point where you could barely see them. It was like they were just barely visible to the naked eye. While that was going on, almost in the same exact area of the sky that we were watching this first group at, and we had been looking at this whole area of the sky, like, often, trying to find them after, like, looking away and then looking back up toward that area of the sky. Just as this first group moved off, directly over our heads manifested three more objects. Three more groups of objects, I should say. Actually, it was like four groups of them. And they just appeared out of nowhere. Now, in the footage, you can't see that because I had actually stopped filming on the first and second groups of film. The films, the videos are broken up into three videos as I took them with my camera. And nothing is retouched. It's all just straight from my cell phone camera. Now, the second footage, there's not much in the way of these objects because I had started to look at them through binoculars at that point, and therefore the footage gets kind of sporadic there. But when it comes back in on the third video, you see multiple groups of objects. These are the ones that appeared directly over our head, out of nowhere. They just manifested there. They just materialized there. And when I mean suddenly, I mean in a blink. We were looking at them in one area of the sky, this first group of objects, then they slowly moved to the east as a group, and then suddenly we looked up, and all four of these sets of objects were there, out of nowhere. They did not come from anywhere else. They were just suddenly there. That's what puts me over the top to think that these weren't birds, they weren't anything natural, and there's some kind of a technology or intelligence involved here. Now, if anybody could explain to me how, birds can suddenly manifest themselves. And no, the lighting conditions didn't change, the sun angle didn't change. We were looking at that area of the sky for almost a half an hour. And there was absolutely nothing there. And suddenly we looked up and there was these 4 groups of objects in the sky. So, I mean, you know, people will stretch to all kinds of lengths to make a skeptical explanation, to propose a skeptical scientific explanation for something that is unusual, unknown. And that's all I'm saying this was. I'm not even trying to make a statement as to what the nature of it was. To me, it was an unknown phenomenon. I've seen flocks of birds before flying overhead in the city. This didn't look anything like that. The flocks of birds I've seen weren't scintillating like this. These were orbs. I looked at them through a good set of binoculars. They were spherical. There was no movement on them to suggest flapping of wings, as with geese that are huge and have huge wings. These objects also must have been huge because the height that they were at in the sky and the size that they looked, you know, visually to the perception of the eye means that these objects had to be big. You know, I'm thinking like maybe 30 to 40 feet each one of them. And they were moving fast too, relative to each other. And, you know, to me, it just doesn't seem like motion that a bird would do, to move the way that these things were moving in relationship to each other. Of course, people, again, will come down on both sides of the aisle on this. You know, again, you'll have the true believers that are, you know, saying the Arcturians are here, and you'll have the hardened skeptics that, you know, wouldn't make a difference if, you know, they were intelligently controlled vehicles from, you know, beings that weren't from around here and came and took them on the craft themselves. They still would say it isn't happening. So, you know, you got the extreme right brain people, you got the extreme left brain people. All I'm saying is, here's the footage. This is my impressions of it. Make of it what you will. And, you know, that's it. And, you know, I'll give people a chance to, you know, air some of their feelings about what they think that this might be. But once again, the main thing here to me is these things moved in very strange patterns in relationship to each other. When looked at through the binoculars, they were perfectly spherical. They were scintillating. Scintillating orbs is how I would describe them. They just simply looked like light in the sky, lights in the sky. I mean, they were all bright, you know. And people will say, oh, well, white geese with the sun reflecting on them, you know, look bright like that. Again, you'd have to see it to your own eye. The video footage is not even going to do it justice. For the people who were actually there, and, you know, I passed around my binoculars and had them all look through it, the ones that said that they thought it were birds, all backed down from that position after looking at it through binoculars. They said, no, those aren't birds. Everyone who looked at it through the binoculars said that. So, you know, that's just my explanation from the people who were actually there and saw it through a decent set of binoculars. Not one of them maintained the position that it was birds after looking at it through the binoculars. I mean, other than that, my take on this is that it could very well be some kind of intelligence that we are dealing with here that is non-human. It could be something that is higher dimensional in its nature. Who knows? And it also could be a technology that very much so humans have developed and are using for some purpose or another that we aren't privy to. I mean, essentially that's what I think the possibilities are. I do not think that it was birds because of the way that the second groupings of formations came into our presence. Again, somebody could not determine that from the footage, but you would have to have been there in person. Every person who was there in person was shocked when they looked up. after watching that first round of them, that first grouping of them, almost disappear.
Look at that.
We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. No dark sarcasm in the classroom. Teacher, leave them kids alone. Hey! Teacher! Leave them kids alone! All in all, it's just another brick in the wall.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on Republic Broadcasting. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. Talking about the very interesting UFO sighting that I had today, and I'll continue to call it a UFO sighting because that's exactly what it was. It's objects that we witnessed here in Philadelphia that were unidentified. If anybody out there listening may have seen this phenomenon, please feel free to call in or get in touch with me. Go to the contacts page of my website and email me, and just put in the subject line, I witnessed the sighting that you did, or something to that effect. I would say at the most, we had about maybe 9 to 10 people out on that street corner simultaneously checking this out, and overall maybe about 20 passed by, and we asked some people what they made of it. Some just, kept going or said, I think it's just birds or whatever. Weren't really interested. But most of the people who saw it were interested in it and thought it looked very odd. And again, the thing that was consistent is after seeing it through binoculars, most people said, no, that isn't birds. Those are some kind of objects, and they looked perfectly spherical when seen through the binoculars. The thing that struck me the most is that these things stayed stationary in one area of the sky for so long and simply shifted positions amongst themselves. If you watch the video, you could see that I pick a frame of reference like street wires, electrical wires on the street, and frame the objects around that so that you could actually see the area of the sky that they're in, and that they do not move. They're not moving. They're not traveling from one place in the sky to another. At some point they did do that, and then people will say, well, the air current shifted at that time. And, I'm not saying I'm totally closed-minded to the possibility of this, but these things kept moving in relationship to each other in a very controlled fashion the entire time. So if there were high winds up in the higher atmosphere, that's very unlikely, that these things would move in the way that they're observed to be moving. And again, I'm just trying to put out some plausible explanations here for what we're not seeing. I just don't buy into this is just a high-flying flock of geese explanation. Again, could it be that? It could be. I'm not going to totally close my mind onto that possibility either, but again, like I said, if you saw it with your eyes and you saw it through binoculars, you would more likely than not rule that out. I think it's a very low probability after seeing it through binoculars. These things maintained exact distances between each other. Birds don't do that. They would be drifting in and out between each other and, separating and coming back together. When you saw it through binoculars, you saw the evenness of the spacing. This was like a flotilla. It was like just something, out of a science fiction movie. And the thing, again, that really, really struck me was when multiple groupings of them appeared over our head instantly. With, absolutely no warning, literally out of the blue. Or out of the milky white chemtrail-laden sky, I should say. We thought also, could the chemtrails be playing a dual role here in what they usually do in geoengineering, whether it's to plasmify the sky or, put tons of metal oxides into the sky for, weather modification. Could there be another motive here that when there are possibilities that they pick things like this up on radar, they're going out there and using the chemtrails simply as an obscuration mission, So maybe they were simply trying to blanket the sky with cloudy layers so that people would not be able to see these things. I don't rule that out as a possibility for why we had such an unimaginably heavy day of chemtrailing here in Philadelphia. I've been following the chemtrail agenda since 1997. Early 97, I was out there with an old VHS camcorder taking footage of the sky, watching these planes lay down these trails. And I'm telling you, since 97, I have never seen a day of spraying heavier, more relentless and nonstop than today here in Philadelphia. I've never seen one like that. Just look at those images. If you could look at those images and tell me that's anything resembling normality, I think you need to check yourself into the nearest mental hospital. That's all I can say. Because what else can you say when you look at those images? Anybody that is a geoengineering denier at the point seeing something like that right over their own head, you have to be out of your mind. And, I think possibly, they do know when these sightings are in our skies. They obviously get them very early on early warning radar. And I think they don't want people pondering any of the issues that come up with this. Look, this is a very popular topic. My Facebook page, when I post these videos, lit up with comments. I post one of my videos, it's like a couple comments here and there. Natural law, morality. But you post a UFO video and everybody goes nuts. And there's opinions, all over the place that range the full spectrum. So, it's very interesting what people find interesting to them, what they want to talk about, what they want to comment on. It's a hot topic, definitely. And I've submitted it to a couple of people and will continue to submit it to a few people that I work with in the ufology field of research. And, I've already gotten back a few comments from them on the skeptical side, on the, could go either way side, and on the side that they feel that this was a fleet of intelligently controlled craft. Again, I come down on the side of it that more likely than not, these objects are under some kind of intelligent control, not going to go to the full, it's definitely alien or other dimensional, although I don't rule out those possibilities either. Could this have to do with some type of scalar technology? Ionospheric heating or, something to that effect. Who knows? This could be weather modification. This could be something that has to do with radionics. It could also be something that is completely outside of our ability to even comprehend or understand. This could be something that is completely other dimensional in its nature. Again, I'm not going to definitively come down and say it is this, it is that, it is that. What I'm going to say, what I don't think it was, is I don't, from what I observed today, think it was just a flock of birds. Again, many people are going to be hardcore on that. because they'll compare it to other footage that looks similar and immediately jump to that conclusion. Again, do I 100% rule that out? No, but I think it's a low probability based on being there at the actual scene of the sighting and seeing it through a decent pair of binoculars. That's where I'm going to say no to that hypothesis or theory. But again, everybody who was there and who saw it with their eyes and then who saw it through my binoculars said that they thought it was some type of craft and not birds. With that having been said, we're going to go to your calls in the second hour. And you could chime in on what you guys think this was. So don't go anywhere. Your call's coming up. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening. Stay with us.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening, into the second hour of tonight's broadcast. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. We're going to go to your calls coming up in the second hour, and you could chime in on what you thought this UFO sighting that I had earlier today might possibly be all about. Before we do that, I have a special guest on the line. With us for the first segment of this hour is Bob Tuscan, a former host here on RBN, who has a very special announcement that he wants to make, and I'll also let Bob comment on what he thought of the sighting. Bob, are you there with us?
I am, Mark. Thanks for having me for this segment.
Absolutely.
I'm very interested in keeping an open mind and looking at all evidence that's out there for extraterrestrial encounters or whatever it might be. So bottom line for me is I look at everything and take it with the greatest pinch of salt, and that's how I go into things, with that agnostic perspective. I spoke about this sort of thinking and learning during my first Free Your Mind lecture, and I think it was Robert Anton Wilson who put it best, that you have to keep an agnostic mindset, but at some point, with enough evidence, you have to then take that and move into the third stage of the trivium, if you will, and go into that wisdom/rhetoric stage. And that's what you did after your observations, and I commend that, and I think we should all own up to our experiences, and even our own experiences should be, to a certain extent, looked at, again, through the lens of being an agnostic thinker. But that aside, I digress. I mean, you and I could talk about that forever, and I certainly feel that Mark is being genuine, folks, with his claims here. Not for a second do I think he's doing this for the sake of being hyperbolic. I got on the phone with Mark shortly after this happened, and he was genuinely moved by this. He was genuinely under the impression that he had seen something, and I believe that Mark, whether you disagree with this being a legitimate sighting, whether you think it's birds or not, is being completely genuine about this and has no agenda in presenting this. And I think we need to put aside our egos and our desire to only talk about one thing or only think certain topics are game and other topics are too taboo to discuss, and get over ourselves and be able to look at something like this and think about it freely and discuss it freely and not alienate somebody who dares to bring it up. So screw you people out there who are hating and want to poo-poo something just because you think that on the surface it doesn't look right. All right, so did that make sense, Mark?
Absolutely, and that's what I was just talking about during the break with you. so many people in the UFO community don't want to discuss issues that people in the truth movement will discuss, like conspiracies or, the loss of freedom that, humanity is experiencing. And so many people in the truth movement don't want to acknowledge the existence of the possibility of extraterrestrial life or talk about anything having to do with, something that is seemingly paranormal in its nature. And I think these two movements really have to, solve their differences and come together and realize all of this is connected. The whole human condition, as I've talked about in the past and past shows during the Cosmic Abandonment series, is connected with this phenomenon of non-human intelligence operating here on this planet. And these groups have to somehow narrow the gap that has widened between them and come together on equal ground and, start bringing different parts of the puzzle to the table and say, hey, this is worth looking at, and so is this, and we need to keep an open mind about all of this stuff. There's just too much closed-mindedness that goes on within both of these circles as far as I'm concerned, and I like to think that maybe I could act as a liaison between these groups at some point.
I think that might be a necessary move to make, Mark, and I think you would be a great liaison to do so, considering you're so rational and so logic-driven, but at the same time you also have, a spiritual side, for lack of a better way of describing it.
Sure.
I talked about on my show a sighting that I had, and it moved me. I was driving home one night, and there was weird red lights that moved in a way that was unflare-like. It did not move like a normal flare, if it was a flare. And I had to talk about it on my show. So I think At the end of the day, what this all comes down to, Mark, is a lack of censorship. We cannot censor our minds,
that's right,
our voices on anything. If you experience something and that truth is there, then by all means, do not pussyfoot around it. It is the truth, or at least it's a perceived action that took place, and therefore we should not have the censor that everybody wants to mandate. And that's a very much similar theme to that of those in the so-called truth movement, whatever that means or does not mean. But that being said, Mark, I'm very pleased to announce here first, on the air for the first time, that my humble show, which is not about me at all, it's about solutions, it's about a revolution, it's about cutting this nasty world that we live in into a place that makes it a little bit more sane and peaceful for my child and my child's child, and so on and so forth. And it's coming back. I'm starting again on Republic Broadcasting Network and other affiliates on Monday. That's this coming Monday. The show will be on at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And Mark Passio will be one of my first guests. Mark and I have been doing this hand in hand for quite some time together. I brought Mark on way back in the day on one of the networks I was on. He then went on the next network I was on, and we've been trying to follow each other and work together ever since. And once again, we will be on the same platform, and he'll come on my show. I'm sure I'll be on Mark's show from time to time in the future to talk about, of course, the Free Your Mind Conference, which is so important, and I can't stress it enough that if you're not getting involved with the Free Your Mind Conference on some level, you're really missing out. We need all the involvement that we can possibly get with this conference to make it happen. Financial involvement is important. It's a necessary evil, but any involvement that you can have in the conference, we welcome it. And so many people are coming together for this gathering of the minds that I am just completely enamored and proud to be a part of it, and humbled to be a part of it, and humbled that my broadcast, the Bob Tuskin Show, for lack of a better name, will be coming back to the airwaves on Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's the big announcement on my end, Mark.
Bob, congratulations on your return to RBN. I know the show is going to pick up right where it left off, setting high-quality standard in broadcast media, and I want to congratulate you for coming back on, and everybody tune in to Bob Tuskin, weekdays, 7 p.m. Eastern time, right?
Yeah, it's Eastern time, and I appreciate that, Mark. And you know what? I really have this internal struggle within me that I want to just vet out real quick. The bottom line is, just like anybody else, sometimes I wonder if I'm just doing it for my ego, if I'm just doing it for the sake of thinking I'm a part of something. And I struggle with that inner dialogue, if you will. But I think at the end of the day, Mark, what I'm going to do differently hopefully will bring some change. I want to focus on solutions. I want to take a real stab at the root of the problem, at the root of the issues, not all the symptoms that we get so caught up on, all these surface level symptoms that become distractions. But I want to get to the root of the problems and offer solutions. And Mark, I appreciate all that you do, and you will be coming on Tuesday, and I look forward to it.
Absolutely, Bob. Thanks so much for coming on to make that great announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Tuscan, check him out, bobtuscan.com. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. Before we go to the phone lines, in studio, I have my friend John, who was also a witness to this sighting and who actually made me aware of it. I want to bring him on quickly to get his take and his impression on the sighting that we witnessed. John, why don't you give the listeners a little rundown of what you feel that you experienced and saw earlier today?
Sure, Mark. Thanks for having me on the show tonight, and it was good hearing Bob's voice also. So it's great to know he's coming back shortly. I could definitely say, being there, judging from the whole experience, that, I heard some of the other feedback from people who posted on Facebook that they thought, it's very possible it could be snow geese or, a pelican colony. But I think you could say what it could be, or what you think it may be. It could be these glowing orbs that, manufacture the crop circles, or you could say it could be Palladian ships or some other, higher extraterrestrial intelligence, be it benevolent or malevolent. But we don't really know that. But I can't tell you exactly what it was, but I could sit here tonight and tell you what it wasn't. And it wasn't any type of bird, geese, pelican, any type of flying mammal. Because, number one, the altitude was way too high. You're talking about over 50,000 feet, easy. These objects were probably in the stratosphere. And number two, I've seen numerous footage of geese flying, and you could hear them. We didn't hear any birds. There was no birds to be heard, no matter what the altitude was. Now, being that we're on ground level and we're looking up over 50,000 feet, possibly into the stratosphere, and we saw individual orbs in equidistance, in relationship to one another. Now, they were kind of like hovering and floating in formations that were very similar to the geese formations, which makes it very difficult for someone on the other side who wasn't physically there and to just take in the evidence that was available at the time. And the only available evidence being there was a good set of binoculars, and number two, you didn't hear no geese. So, taking that into consideration, I firmly believe it was some type of fleet of craft.
Let me ask you a question. When you looked at it through the binoculars, what was your impression? Tell people what you saw visually when you looked at it as clear as you were going to see it with the aid of a piece of technology like that.
At that moment, I was just very mad at myself for all these years. I never bought a high-powered telescope. At that moment, I wish I had a high-powered telescope. But what I saw through the binoculars was quite amazing. I saw bright specks that were kind of roundish in shape, but they were very equally, distant from one another, keeping a very rigid, tight formation. They weren't like going in and out. They were very, stationary.
Almost as if like you had a piece of wood or something and you poked holes through it and there was light shining through that piece of wood. How equally spaced you would see the light coming through that piece of wood. That's literally what it was like. And even when they moved like laterally, or upward and downward, like if they changed altitude, they would stay perfectly in formation with each other. It was a very non-organic movement or aspect of their movement as far as I was concerned. If you see birds or animals moving in relationship to each other, there's an organic flow to that type of movement. There was no such organic motion to that. It looked very rigid. At least that's what I saw when I looked at it through the binoculars. I mean, would you concur with that?
Oh yeah, definitely. And most bird, formations, they're flying to their destination. They're not looking to really stay in one section of the sky. They're flying towards a destination. They all have a route.
Right.
These formations, and there were 4 formations at one moment that magically appeared out of thin air, because we were scanning the whole sky.
Yeah, that's the thing that freaked me out the most in the whole thing. Even seeing the first flotilla or fleet or whatever you want to call it, when those 4 came over our head suddenly and appeared there, that's when I felt that this was something otherworldly, because there's no way that the 10 people standing on that street corner would not have seen those approach from some portion of the sky. I cannot bring myself to accept that somehow, all of our minds shut down simultaneously and we suddenly weren't aware of our surroundings just because we were witnessing this event going on in one portion of the sky. None of us would have seen all 4 of these formations approach in one area of the sky directly over our heads, and then we suddenly looked up and there they were, out of nowhere. That's the thing that did it for me, to say I don't think that this is any kind of a natural phenomenon. This is something that is beyond our comprehension or understanding taking place.
No. When you're experiencing, such a, out of the ordinary kind of experience like that, you're pretty much scanning the whole sky to see if there's anything else. If there might be, you don't want to be focused on one thing, and we were focused.
I know, I kept doing that. I kept looking at other areas of the sky to say, hey, are there any more of them anywhere else?
Yeah, you had to.
Sure.
You had to scan the sky, even though the one formation that kind of faded out when we were looking towards the south eastern part of the sky, that's when I think it just gained higher elevation to the point where it was just obscured by all the
that's correct.
Blankets of chemtrail, that the whole sky was an utter mess.
Right.
It was a mess.
And that is what it looked like to me. Like they ascended in altitude and literally were no longer in our visual perception range anymore.
Well, when the multiple formations appeared, I considered that a second sighting. Yeah. And when those formations appeared, they were actually lower. They were much lower, so we were able to get a better view of it. And
that's in video 3 that we're referring to.
That's the third part.
You have to understand, folks, video 1 is the first part of the sighting, the first flotilla or fleet. Video 2, you see a bit of them trailing off as they're moving slightly eastward at that point. And then, my footage becomes erratic because I'm looking through binoculars at that point, and I'm not focusing on the taking of the video, although the camera is still on. In video 3, just before video 3, I had shut the camera off for several minutes because we thought the sighting was done. And then I turned it back on after people said, wow, look up right over our head. There they are again. They materialized over our head out of nowhere. 4 formations. That's when that video, I am pointing that camera directly upward. It is not pointed laterally in any direction. It is pointed directly at the zenith of the sky, straight up. They were directly over our heads. And this footage happened right on my street corner, practically right over my house. Ladies and gentlemen, your calls on the other side. John, thanks so much for contributing your input and giving us your take on this sighting.
Thank you, Mark.
You got it. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. So let's go to your phone. Let's go to the phone lines and take your calls. The toll-free number to join us, 800-313-9443. Let's hear from Zidani in Connecticut. You're live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome.
Hello, Mark.
Yes.
Good evening. How are you?
Doing well.
I actually got the opportunity to meet you and speak with you at length at the Manchester in Connecticut event back in October.
Yes, the Demystifying the Occult seminar, which hopefully I'll have out on video in the not-too-distant future.
Awesome. And
Excellent.
I did want to address my name, as it's an item you've addressed. Zidani is not my legal name, but it's also nothing I'm hiding behind. I'm perfectly comfortable with my legal forms of my name as they have changed. I just do use it as an initiated name into a spiritually initiated name.
Sure.
And I appreciate where you're coming from with that, and people who are hiding need to not be hiding. I actually had called in very early because I wanted to catch you. I've been attempting to get into the queue for a few weeks. I was really hoping to speak to more of the order following layer, but as discovered, you transited to the other UFO topic. As an experiencer, from my youth, I have what to comment to that as well. But to even to enter the arena on your show, and thank you for having me, I know it's with a kind of a trepidation because there are so many layers and strata to everything, and the UFO discussion is obviously no exception to that.
Sure.
Are you familiar with the film Schenectady?
No, I'm not.
It's like Kaufman, the guy who did Adaptation.
Okay.
The big Hollywood screenwriter. You should check it out. I know you enjoy films, and it's pretty immense. The setting is an aging director, and the beginning of it is kind of an eerie take on life and the way things are kind of, about loss, losing, breaking down, and he creates this masterpiece work where he's got people on set for 20 years. Essentially, they're living their lives. They have doubles. It's a very macrocosm to microcosm kind of introspective. It's very elaborate, very interesting. More people might be familiar with his work Adaptation that Nicolas Cage was in. Anyhow, it's with that kind of a take that we know there are so many layers to everything that's going on. I know when I was a child, I began continually experiencing things where I lived in Connecticut, kind of in a woodsy area. And even now, people who come up to where I grew up, it doesn't take long at night to begin to see things happening. And many different, diverse types of people have come to like, what's that? Well, give it a few more minutes, it'll get stranger. And more recently, there were, again, it's kind of like your collective hallucination statement. No, that wasn't happening. This this was a very odd thing. It was small, but it just floated around. And a few of us, there were four of us who were sitting around in a northern town in Connecticut, and we were talking, and this thing just floated through, and it's like very tiny, but we were all experiencing it. It was very, very weird. So these things do occur. Obviously, there are millions of experiencers around the globe, and they are not part of our conventional life, at the very least. I know I've seen many different things. Is it okay to comment on the order following thread a little too?
Sure. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I do just want to say to that I deeply appreciate your work and what you do, the tone you do it with, and the forthrightness that you take in addressing the issues from the angles you come at them with. I mean, dealing with the New Age cult and its particular brand of, religiosity,
right,
and what it's brought to bear is clearly, it's just terrible.
It's a tough one. That's a tough one for a lot of people to break out of, for sure.
It is. And, I know for most people it's a shame because they come to their spirituality, I believe, because of the stress and tension that they live in. They come there to find some relief for that. So the last thing they want to hear is that they have to work, and where they're coming to find some peace of mind, so to speak. But we have obligations, be they moral or what have you here, and obviously that doesn't really work, to not fight the battle in the mind and realize that's not a place to be. And I also appreciate the other angle, coming at the various forms of brutality that we see in cases like Eric Garner, cases like the Ferguson case, and just our generally policed state, to deal with those angles. We obviously have tons of legislation as it's burgoying since 2011 in the Occupy movement and what's come forward explicitly. But obviously it's been building for at least 150 years here.
Sure.
But that's all the angles you come from are very important. I agree with so much of what you do, and it's kind of with that I'm reluctant to tamper with that at all. Though, if allowed, I would. I almost feel sorry. It's listening to you, I feel that the tenure of some of what you're getting in email or chat or whatever sounds to be sort of assaulting people who insist on remaining ignorant and just wasting your time. And but at the same time, perhaps to raise the bar and the caliber, because they would like to constructively challenge you a bit, not abrasively, if possible.
Sure.
As regards the concept that all order following is innately immoral, if you want to call it that, because as a fellow esoterist, I question the notion of the body, that the body is obviously, really the most consistent theme woven through all esoteric literature. And if we relate the body, there is clearly a type of order following that every different element of the body in a strata is working through. And there's a kind of order following. It's an undercurrent that I see developing through some of what you're saying that could go awry. And I again, am reluctant to tamper with that because it's not the thrust, obviously, of what your work is so well aimed at.
Sure. I mean, when I'm talking about order following, I mean literally like a hierarchical structure of command where somebody is listening to what somebody else is telling them to do physically with their actions. So, it's not anything more esoteric than that. It's simply if I command somebody to do something and then they do it,
True.
They've done that only because I've commanded them to do it, not because they've thought through the action and whether it's in harmony with spiritual law or not, and they just did it anyway because they are okay with abdicating their personal responsibility and letting somebody do their thinking for them. That's what I literally mean by order following in the strictest sense of the word.
And I hear you. We would still question off the model of the body to some extent that there is not a more, what I call, every term to when I've taught, to more or less importance, but there is a quality of beings where there are superior and inferior, where in the true sense, as you may know or see or not see, is with superior entity, they really have more responsibility to the collective to be guiding that ship or the body. And there is a hierarchy of direction. And when you use the word cult, and I know what cult you are talking about very well, even from my own personal background in it in some ways, but to just aggressively use the word, I'd be reluctant to, because obviously cult is, it can be tribal. You know, so when we say we're dealing with the cult of Aton, we're dealing with the cult of the black hole sun, we're dealing with the cult of Saturn. So it's a question of who, look up, you know, who are you serving?
Sure.
It's not seva, it's not a collective, you know, benefit to the all beings. You're serving, you know, the oblivion cult of Saturn.
That's right.
So,
it's the cult of death. I mean, it's literally the cult of the dark sun. You know, as I explained in my Demystifying the Occult seminar, that's really the only cult that's operating on this planet right now. I mean, they all feed into that one overarching cult of the dark sun, the black sun. You know, this is one huge dark Atonist, dark solar cult.
Material too. You know, it seems like what we're probably dealing with, I would say, somewhere in between what wasn't mentioned.
I'll take a break.
Okay, we're going to a break. We'll be back, folks, to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. We're into the last segment of the show for this evening. Let's see if we could squeeze in a couple more callers. Let's hear from Glenn in Ontario. Glenn, you're live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome.
Hi, are you talking to me?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So, would you be able to take a question on self-defense?
On what?
Self-defense.
Sure. Absolutely.
Defense of course. Okay. So what I'm wondering is, you know, if we're dealing with a murderer or a child rapist or something, but they aren't actually in the act, they've already done it, you know, is lethal force still acceptable? Or, like, 'cause I sort of would think it is, but, you know, just wondering your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, people will get into the whole debate of, you know, do we go and hunt a person down? I guess if he's been a pariah on society and, you know, unrightfully, you know, killed other people, I mean, I guess, you know, people would have to make that judgment call. Would somebody have the right to defend themselves from somebody from that being in their community? I would say that yes, they would. My take on that is the best way of dealing with that is to morally educate people from when they're young so they don't turn into people like that, you know, and then you won't have to deal with that situation. Again, that's why I always advocate for not keeping people in prisons. I don't believe in the concept of any prison, because all that does is isolate people from the repercussions of their natural law failure to morally educate the young. And if we try to just sequester them out of society, then we don't deal with the negative repercussions that they create, and we don't learn how natural law works to bring us the experience that we're having based upon what our actions were. So that's a difficult one. I would say the best way to deal with that is not get into that situation. But of course, there are people who are, you know, have grown up in an immoral capacity and murder people. So I would say that the community has the right to deal with that in whatever way they so choose to deal with it. You know, read into that what you will.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think you're obviously right about the education. You try and make peace on Earth first, right? Anyway, one more question.
Sure.
So you guys were talking before about, like, the dark cult of Aton and all this. So, what do you think of Zionism? Do you think that's like a centerpiece in what they actually believe, or just this ideology?
It's the same thing. It's the same ideology. It's the same cult ideology. It's just a different name for it. The cult of the black sun, the dark side of the sun, whatever you want to call it. It's a dark solar cult that basically believes that they're God. They're going to control and own people. and they're higher than the laws of the universe. They're higher than the laws of nature and creation. It's all the same cult. It's different, masks on the same face, basically. So Zionism is a part of that. People think it's simply a political ideology. I would say it's a religion, just like other occult religions and organizations, and it works toward the same goals of control and enslavement of people. And many of them are all too happy. Many who belong to that cult are all too happy to tell you that that's what their goals and agendas are. So I've briefly talked about it on a past show when I got into dark Kabbalism, the Klipotic Kabbalah. I briefly spoke about Zionism in one of those podcasts. If you go back and listen to that material, it's there.
The Klipotic. Okay, cool. Yeah, Sarion wrote on that as well, the Zionism being the same as the cult of Aton. Anyway, thanks a lot, man. You point out the obvious on how we can make peace on Earth, because that's proximity to that's correlated to the intelligence of humanity and
that's
the amount of work we're willing to put into that, So,
and Glenn, you're right on point with that analysis. I want to thank you so much for the call, and he's right. It says so much about where we're at as a species in our condition, because if the solution is so simple. It always has been the golden rule. It always has been, don't treat others like you don't want to be treated, the way you wouldn't prefer to be treated. I call it the apophatic variant of the golden rule. The golden rule looked at in the negative. Don't use the golden rule and say, treat others as you want to be treated. How about we say, don't treat others the way you would not want to be treated. So if you don't want to be treated that way, don't treat others that way. Then it becomes real unambiguous and so simple that a child can figure it out. You don't want to be harmed, defrauded, stolen from, raped, have your rights taken away. Don't do that to other people. Period. The end. It's so simple, it's almost stupid, folks. It can't get any simpler than that, and humanity has proven we still can't grasp it, we still can't understand it, and we want the associated suffering and death that's going to come with refusing to live according to that basic rule. So, it becomes a burden to keep having to get up and say repeatedly over and over things which I already know and have come to understand. That's what the great work is, unfortunately. Everybody has to get it. We got to get on the same page when it comes to that basic way of treating each other. Then we can be different in lots of other ways, but until we have that common sense laid down as the foundation in all of our minds and hearts, don't expect anything to change for the better here. Let's see if we could get a couple more calls, and let's hear from Dan in Washington. Dan, you're live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Mark. With respect for the integrity of all of your efforts, I just wanted to try and provide a little bit of objective input and experience concerning your sighting today.
Sure.
Immediately upon hearing the beginning of your claim, I did some web search, and the only augmentation that I can offer comes from Stanford's a study of bird migration from Stanford University. They quantified it with data gathering. Evidently, birds have greater lung capacity than mammals, and it comes down to energy and efficiency when they're in the migratory process. My experience, I don't have any ornithological background. However, I lived 20 years under the Pacific Flyway and in a very pristine part of Washington State, and had opportunities to see the patterns on countless times of what I saw, and I'm getting just a tiny bit ahead of myself, first of all, by saying I was not there. So
sure.
the only aspect, the only argument that I don't know how to address is the orb aspect that you brought up, but hopefully I might be able to provide concise input.
We have very limited time because we're coming down to the end of the show. Let me ask you a question.
Very well.
Let me ask you a question. What I would like an explanation for is how did four groupings of these objects suddenly appear over the heads of multiple eyewitnesses who were looking up at the sky? That's the only question I really want answered personally. I mean, no one has been able to even touch that question or provide any kind of an explanation for that. All of us scanning the sky for minutes were unable to see any part of their approach. Now, to me, you can't blame sun angle on that, and you can't say you just have all untrained eyewitnesses. I've been looking into the sky since I was 5 years old. What can make that happen? I think that's a good place to end the show, folks, on a question that leaves a little bit of doubt and wonder. And that's a good place to take us into the next year, I think. That's all the time we have for this edition of What on Earth is Happening, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, there are only two mistakes you can make on the path to truth: not starting and not going all the way. We'll see you right here next year. Good night, everyone.